Hello, General Hospital today will reveal the recent developments on General Hospital have hinted at a deeply disturbing and emotionally charged turn in the storyline of Drew Cain as fragments of medical and psychological tension weave their way into the canvas of Poor Charles. Fans are beginning to speculate that Drew might be experiencing a rare and terrifying condition locked-in syndrome. This condition, where the mind remains conscious while the body is paralyzed and unable to communicate, except possibly through eye movement, would not only alter Drew's personal arc dramatically, but also place an enormous psychological weight on the characters around him. The seeds for this development are being sown through subtle cues, strange behavior, and one woman's desperate cover-up, Willow Cain. The foreshadowing began to intensify when Drew exhibited alarming symptoms that Willow was quick to respond to, at least on the surface. On the day Drew's condition took a visible turn for the worse, Willow swiftly called for an ambulance and accompanied him to the General Hospital emergency unit. But even in this moment of supposed panic, there was something curiously performative in Willow's actions. Her demeanor, although anxious, appeared more rehearsed than instinctive. Her tears felt timed. Her concern, while believable to the staff at GH, masked a heavier agenda, one that seemed more invested in controlling the narrative than in Drew's well-being. This raises a chilling question. Was Drew's collapse entirely unforeseen by Willow? As the ambulance raced through the streets of Port Charles, Willow was already crafting a story that painted her as a panicked wife, rushing her husband to safety. Once inside the hospital, she presented herself as emotionally fragile, unable to understand what was happening to Drew. But in reality, she was always several steps ahead. Her conversation with Elizabeth Baldwin, one of Drew's closest allies at GH, set the stage for a medical misunderstanding. Willow mentioned slurred speech, facial drooping, and mental confusion. All textbook signs of a neurological event, but told in a way that subtly framed Drew as someone whose medical issues just suddenly emerged without warning. That version of events suited her because it stripped away any suspicions that she might have known more than she was saying. Andrew Lucas Jones, the physician tasked with evaluating Drew's rapidly declining condition. The show had been preempted on Tuesday, January 20th, but when it resumed on Wednesday, Lucas offered viewers a vital turning point. He began relaying updates on Drew's status, which hinted at something far more severe than a temporary health scare. While his diagnosis was still in progress, the undertones of his report, when paired with Willow's oddly composed fear, led to one grim possibility: Drew might be conscious but unable to communicate. That prospect adds an unsettling layer to the situation, particularly considering the dark secret Drew had been threatening to reveal. What makes this even more disturbing is the timing. Prior to this medical emergency, Drew had begun to show signs of inner conflict and mental distress, likely caused by the weight of knowledge he carried about Willow. Rumors had long been swirling that Willow was hiding a deeper deception, one so serious that it could dismantle her image as a loving mother and loyal partner. There had been hints that Drew was the one person she feared most, not because he would harm her, but because he knew the truth and was finally ready to speak it. But now, with Drew suddenly rendered helpless, the scales have tipped dramatically in Willow's favor. She no longer has to worry about silencing Drew, his body has done it for her. In this new dynamic, Willow is both caretaker and jailer. Her frequent appearances at Drew's bedside, while emotionally evocative to the casual observer, now feel more like surveillance. Is she really keeping vigil, or is she guarding her greatest threat from recovery? The more she inserts herself into Drew's medical decisions, the clearer it becomes that she wants to control not just how others perceive Drew's condition, but whether he is allowed the chance to regain autonomy. If Drew is truly experiencing locked-in syndrome, then he may be fully aware of Willow's betrayal, but utterly incapable of warning anyone. That realization casts a dark shadow over every scene between them and intensifies the moral stakes of the storyline. Willow's mastery of manipulation becomes even more pronounced. When viewed through the lens of her fabricated breakdown, her emotional spiral at GH was less a symptom of trauma and more a performance designed to distract and deflect. She inserted herself as the most emotionally affected figure, thereby diverting suspicion away from her role in Drew's demise. It's a tactic that works well in a hospital setting where empathy often overrides scrutiny. By making herself the grieving partner, she gained unfiltered access to Drew's room, medical files, and even influence over decisions about his care. The strategic positioning ensures she is the first and final voice in every conversation about Drew's condition. And in doing so, she further isolates him from anyone who might suspect the truth. As for Drew, the implications of being physically trapped while mentally conscious are horrifying. If he is suffering from locked-in syndrome, then every moment he spends in that bed is filled with frustration, fear, and helplessness. The inability to warn those he loves about Willow's duplicity becomes a daily torment. It's a living nightmare where every blink or movement he can muster is met with misinterpretation or ignored entirely. And if Willow is actively suppressing his efforts to communicate, perhaps dismissing eye movements as involuntary or claiming they're meaningless, then she is not just passively benefiting from his condition, but actively exploiting it. The show's decision to delay the storyline's broadcast has only heightened fan speculation, especially as details about the postponed episode began to leak. Some viewers believe the delay was strategic, allowing writers to recalibrate the pacing and emotional beats of a plot that could become one of GH's most controversial and psychologically intense arcs in years. Others suspect that the showrunners wanted to give space for Lucas Jones' return to resonate more strongly, as his involvement in Drew's case will likely be pivotal in determining whether anyone else begins to see through Willow's act. There's also a growing sense that Elizabeth Baldwin may become a crucial figure in exposing the truth. While Willow may have succeeded in fooling her initially, Elizabeth has known Drew long enough to detect when something doesn't add up. If Drew begins to exhibit signs of awareness through repeated eye contact, attempts to respond to questions, or visible emotional reactions, Elizabeth might be the one person who refuses to dismiss them. Her medical training, combined with her intuitive sense of emotional nuance, could make her the bridge between Drew's silent suffering and the outside world. But that will depend on whether she can overcome Willow's carefully constructed web of deceit before it's too late. As the situation unfolds, the moral lines between victim and perpetrator begin to blur. Drew's physical entrapment mirrors the emotional and ethical entrapment that Willow now finds herself in. Every choice she makes from here on out will either deepen her guilt or expose her to the consequences she has so far evaded. Meanwhile, Drew's fate hangs in the balance not just of medical science, but of whether someone, anyone, can hear the truth he is silently screaming. The question isn't just whether he will survive. It's whether he will ever be heard again. And as the days pass, the possibility of rescue dims. Not because Drew has given up, but because his world is now dictated by the lies of the one person who claims to love him most. That's the chilling power of psychological captivity. It doesn't require bars or chains. Only silence, manipulation, and the ability to convince everyone else that nothing is wrong. In Willow's hands, that silence has become Drew's prison. Whether he can escape, it remains the most haunting question of all. As Lucas continues to brief those closest to Drew on his condition, the gravity of the situation becomes impossible to ignore. The initial diagnosis points to a severe and life-altering stroke, one that struck with enough force to disrupt multiple neurological pathways at once. Lucas explains that the medical team has no choice but to move forward under the assumption that Drew's condition is critical, which means implementing an aggressive stroke treatment protocol immediately. Every decision is now guided by urgency, precision, and the awareness that time lost could permanently determine the boundaries of Drew's future. He is placed under constant observation, surrounded by machines that track every subtle change in brain activity, heart rhythm, and oxygen levels. As the staff prepares for a long and uncertain battle, despite the swift response, Lucas makes it clear that any discussion of recovery is premature. The human brain, especially after trauma of this magnitude, does not reveal its intentions quickly. Some patients show improvement within days. Others deteriorate without warning, and many exist in an agonizing limbo where consciousness and physical ability no longer align. Lucas emphasizes that this is the stage where medicine must wait and watch because the next few days will only reveal patterns, not answers. The uncertainty hangs heavily in the air, creating a silence that feels almost louder than the machines surrounding Drew's bed. Lucas then broadens the conversation to explain the possible long-term consequences of a stroke like Drew's. Even in the most optimistic scenarios, patients often face lasting neurological deficits. Speech impairment is common, ranging from mild difficulty finding words to complete loss of verbal communication. Motor function can also be compromised, sometimes affecting only one side of the body, sometimes stripping away voluntary movement altogether. These outcomes are not rare complications, but expected risks. When the brain has been deprived of oxygen and blood flow for even a short time, the idea that Drew may never return to the man he once was, begins to take shape as a very real possibility rather than a distant fear. Willow, drawing on her background as a nurse, acknowledges these risks with unsettling composure. She understands the language Lucas is using, the implications behind each careful phrase. She recognizes that aphasia could rob Drew of his ability to speak, that paralysis could limit or entirely eliminate his capacity to move. On the surface, her clinical insight appears helpful, even reassuring, as if she is processing the information rationally. But beneath that professional calm lies a deeper tension because Willow knows that the loss of speech and movement would also mean the loss of Drew's ability to expose her. What sounds like a neutral medical observation carries a far darker subtext. When filtered through her private fears, Lucas then introduces a possibility that shifts the tone of the entire discussion. In rare and extreme cases, he explains stroke patients can develop a condition in which they are fully conscious but almost completely paralyzed. Their minds remain alert, aware of their surroundings, capable of thought and emotion. Yet their bodies refuse to respond. The state known for its cruelty and psychological torment traps patients inside themselves. They may hear every word spoken around them, understand every decision being made on their behalf, and feel every moment of fear or frustration, all without the ability to communicate. Lucas makes it clear that confirming such a condition takes time, careful testing, and patience. Because it cannot be diagnosed immediately. Once that possibility is placed on the table, it becomes difficult to ignore how neatly it aligns with everything unfolding around Drew. The implications are chilling. If Drew were to develop locked-in syndrome, he would be rendered completely powerless. He would not be able to speak, gesture, or physically alert anyone to the truth he carries. Even if his mind remained sharp and fully aware, he would be reduced to a silent observer of his own life, dependent on others to interpret even the smallest movements of his eyes. And if those around him choose not to see or choose to dismiss what little communication he might manage, then he would be effectively erased as a witness. From a narrative standpoint, Lucas's explanation feels less like a medical footnote and more like a warning. The groundwork is being laid for a storyline in which Drew's greatest strength, his awareness and integrity, becomes his greatest torment. The more conscious he remains, the more unbearable his silence will be. He will know exactly what has been done to him, who is responsible, and how close he came to revealing the truth. Yet, he will be unable to stop events from unfolding in Willow's favor. His body will become the final barrier between justice and deception. If this condition becomes Drew's reality, Willow's position grows even more disturbing. She would stand as both caregiver and gatekeeper. The person everyone trusts to interpret Drew's needs and condition. Any subtle attempt by Drew to communicate could be minimized, explained away as involuntary reflex, or dismissed as wishful thinking from those desperate to believe he is still present. Willow's medical knowledge gives her a dangerous advantage, allowing her to frame every development in a way that protects her version of events. In that dynamic, Drew's silence is no longer accidental. It becomes a tool that serves her survival. The tragedy of locked-in syndrome lies not only in physical paralysis, but in emotional isolation. Drew could be screaming internally while appearing calm and unresponsive on the outside. Every whispered conversation at his bedside, every strategic decision made without his consent would be absorbed and understood. The truth he holds would grow heavier with each passing hour, turning his awareness into a form of punishment rather than comfort. Survival in this context would not feel like victory, but like endurance. As Lucas's words sink in, it becomes increasingly difficult to believe this possibility is merely hypothetical. The hints are too precise, the timing too deliberate. Everything suggests that Drew's condition will strip him of the very tools he needs to defend himself. If he is indeed locked inside his own body, then the cruel irony is complete. He will be alive, conscious, and fully aware of Willow's betrayal, yet utterly incapable of stopping her. His silence will not be a choice, but a sentence, and in that silence, the balance of power shifts irrevocably. Drew's truth remains trapped behind unresponsive muscles and unspoken words, while Willow moves freely, shaping the story the world will believe. Whether anyone will recognize the signs of Drew's awareness before that silence becomes permanent remains uncertain. But one thing is clear. If lockdown syndrome becomes his fate, Drew will not just be fighting for recovery. He will be fighting to be believed, to be seen, and to be heard in a world that no longer expects him to speak at all. Following the disturbing turn in Drew Cain's storyline on General Hospital, recent developments only deepen the sense of dread surrounding his condition and intensify the dark implications of Willow Cain's involvement. With the diagnosis of a severe stroke confirmed by Lucas, Drew is now immobilized in more ways than one. But as the evidence builds, particularly Willow's past behavior, viewers are beginning to understand that Drew's physical imprisonment inside his own body may mirror an even darker psychological captivity orchestrated by someone he once trusted completely. Drew's inability to speak or move may seem at first like a tragic result of an unexpected medical emergency. However, the truth becomes much more sinister when viewed in light of recent revelations. The very fact that Drew was injected in the neck, an act that directly contributed to his stroke, casts an undeniable shadow over Willow's role. This wasn't the action of a loving, protective wife. It was calculated, deliberate, and violent. In retrospect, it becomes clear that Willow is not simply a woman overwhelmed by stress or fear. She is someone with something to hide and someone willing to take drastic measures to ensure it stays hidden. As a nurse, Willow understands the consequences of injecting someone in a vulnerable location, the neck. Her actions cannot be dismissed as an accident or panic response. Instead, they point to premeditation, a last-ditch effort to silence Drew permanently before he could expose his secret that she desperately needed to bury. The severity of Drew's condition after the attack and the fact that it led to a stroke only cements the conclusion that Willow is far from innocent. She may have covered it well in front of others, but the evidence now reveals a woman actively involved in silencing her husband before he could speak the truth, and yet Drew is alive. He survives, but just barely, and now lies trapped within his body, unable to call out the betrayal. The horror of his situation is not only in the stroke itself, but in the awareness that he may know what Willow has done and cannot tell anyone. There is no voice, no gesture, no physical outlet through which he can warn his loved ones. He is a prisoner in his own body, fully conscious and painfully aware that the person caring for him is the same person who tried to destroy him. In this perverse twist, his life is now tethered to the one individual he should fear most. With Lucas confirming that Drew's stroke was serious, the path forward becomes devastatingly clear. Lucas has already explained that the stroke protocol is being applied, but the prognosis remains uncertain. Recovery, if it happens at all, will be long and fragile. And in that uncertainty, Willow steps forward to take control not just of Drew's care, but of his entire narrative. She is now positioned as the one responsible for making decisions about his health, his environment, and his future. That kind of unchecked power, especially in the hands of someone with something to conceal, is dangerous. Willow's next move will likely involve relocating Drew to a long-term care facility, such as Turning Woods. On the surface, this decision may be presented as an act of compassion, giving Drew the quiet, structured environment he needs to heal. But in reality, it could be a calculated effort to isolate him further. By removing him from General Hospital, she cuts him off from staff who might begin to question his condition or detect subtle signs of awareness. In a facility under her influence, Drew will have fewer opportunities to be seen, heard, or rescued, and Willow, under the guise of concern, will have unrestricted access to control every detail of his existence. The implications are chilling. Drew could spend weeks, months, or longer in a silent, motionless state while Willow maintains her freight of loyalty and devotion. Family and friends may accept her narrative, believing she's standing by her husband during a time of tragedy. Unaware that she's the architect of that very tragedy, her access to Drew gives her the perfect opportunity to intercept communication attempts, dismiss any signs of lucidity as false hope, and shape every interpretation of his medical status. The more people believe she's the grieving, supportive wife, the less likely they are to question her motives or remember that Drew once tried to expose her. And what of the secret Drew was holding? The one that led Willow to take such drastic measures. Though the details have yet to be confirmed, it's clear from her desperation that it was something potentially life-ruining. Whether it involved past crimes, falsified medical records, or betrayals within their family, the fact remains Drew was on the verge of telling someone, and Willow chose to stop him at any cost. That makes the stakes unimaginably high. Now that she's successfully silenced him, she may feel empowered to eliminate or manipulate any other potential threats to her stability. The writers of General Hospital have masterfully constructed a scenario where Drew's physical condition mirrors the emotional manipulation at the heart of this story. By making him fully aware yet completely immobile, they have placed the audience in the horrifying position of witnessing his consciousness struggle beneath a mask of stillness. Every scene of Willow caring for him, speaking to him, or making decisions on his behalf, will now be layered with dread because viewers know what the other characters don't, that Drew is likely screaming inside and no one can hear him. Lucas's dialogue, subtle yet crucial, was the final confirmation of this devastating path. When he acknowledged the possibility of locked-in syndrome, he wasn't just outlining a worst-case medical scenario. He was guiding,